Well, so one of the things that people keep talking about is as China gets more and more unstable, is will they invade Taiwan, get into some kind of military aggression, some kind of actual war, and to an extent we have seen a lot more aggression by China, like the attacks on the Philippines.
I think the Philippines is a situation where, because the Philippines is actually fighting back, and they're fighting back in political warfare ways, it's almost like the CCP doesn't exactly know how to deal with it, right?
That's our thing.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, well, because the Filipino government is like really pushing out videos of like these Chinese Coast Guard vessels shooting water cannons at Filipino ships, and this is kind of the opposite way that the Biden administration has been doing. Like, they tried to cover up the spy balloon thing.
It's almost like using the truth is a more effective tool. Weird, right?
Mm.
Huh. Well, the Filipino government has figured that out, so good for them.
But so the point I was making is, there's this fear some people have. They're like, oh, okay, China's gonna like start a war to kind of cover these things up, and that's kind of feeds into the whole thing of like, oh, well, we have to reopen military to military communication with China so our militaries can talk, so we can prevent an escalation, and this gives another powerful carrot to China.
If the CCP is determined to start a war, military to military communication with the US is not going to stop them from doing that. You know what I mean? Like, that's only useful supposedly to stop accidental escalations. But again,
there's not accidental stuff.
Like, well, there could be something that happens by accident, but then if two countries really don't want to go to war, I think they could find a way to not do that, even if they didn't have direct
even
military.
if like the dangerous maneuvers that Chinese jets are doing with American planes in the South China Sea, even if they crash and like pilots on both sides are killed, it's not like, oh, war is going to happen. There are still decisions that need to be made on both sides for war to actually happen.
But what I mean by not being accidental is that when the CCP, when the People's Liberation Army does these dangerous maneuvers, like they're essentially asking for an incident to maybe accidentally occur. But the incident could be itself an accident, but the tactics used to create a field in which accidents can happen is intentional.
Yeah, the individual Chinese pilot performing these dangerous maneuvers did not come up with that idea on his own.
Right.
That came from the top.
He's unlikely to want to get into a deadly accident on his own.
I don't know. I don't know if like pilots are really the best at like risk,
Risk.
You're basing this entirely off of Top Gun, aren't you?
Yeah.
Did that movie come out this year?
Top Gun Maverick.
I haven't seen movies in years.
Was that last year?
I don't even remember.
But yeah, so like the U.S. made this whole thing about like, okay, trying to reestablish military to military communications. And that was like touted as one of the big achievements of APEC. That, Biden and Xi met, military to military communications were reopened. Except 2 months later, there still has been no military to military communication. And China is saying, like, the excuse for that is given is that, well, the equivalent Li Shangfu, one of the many people who got purged this year, well, he's gone. So that's why there hasn't been able to be any military to military communication. Except China is still doing military to military communication with other countries. So it's just, they made this whole thing. They cleaned up San Francisco, all for Xi Jinping. And the U.S., we got nothing. We got nothing.
That military to military excuse actually reminds me of when we had David Stilwell on, and he was talking about when he was like an attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, like they refused to let him speak to his counterpart.
Oh,
and
yeah.
like they just kind of kept stalling him with like all these different excuses as to like why he couldn't, and they tried to send like lower level people for him to talk to instead. And yeah, just like, yeah, there's nobody else that could possibly do the military to military communication.
No, it's not possible.
The PLA relies on just this one guy who was purged.
Yeah. And then this goes back to like the U.S. needs to, get rid of the engagement school. I think the best way to do that is kind of to return to, the proud American tradition of tar and feathering.
You know what's funny? I knew you were going to say tar and feathering.
Really?
Yes.
You know me so well.
I mean, it just seems like a very not top of mind thing, but I knew you were going to say it.
Yeah. Wow. Pretty cool. I always wondered, like, how disfiguring is that? Like, is it like burning tar?
Well,
that will,
It
like,
is burning. I think
It's often deadly.
it is
because
deadly.
Yeah.
I didn't get a sense of that in
it-
school
it-
when we were learning about
It is
this. and I was
generally
always
deadly
like,
just because of the way it asphyxiates. Like, even if it doesn't get into your lungs, like if it does, you're gone. But also, like your skin,
I mean-
won't be able to breathe. And
Also, I
also,
don't-
this was like the 19th century, so
1700, so 18th century.
yeah. Well, also in the 1800s. I mean, wasn't it in like Tom Sawyer? There was something about that.
Somebody got tarred and feathered in Tom Sawyer?
I don't remember.
I don't remember,
that.
but I mean, I haven't
must
read
have-
that since in the 8th grade.
But
so.
at any rate, what my point is that medical technology could not save you from having tar all over your body.
Really? Like, even if they put some leashes on?
Leeches just suck up the tar, you're good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, even if you manage to get rid of the tar, you've got, like 3rd-degree burns.
Okay, so it was like hot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think it was like boiling tar.
Okay,
Yeah,
like-
just a way to torture people to death, essentially.
It wasn't like in like Boy Meets World where they glued the people to the chairs and then poured honey over. Oh no, this was a stupid episode. This is a tangent now, but
Okay.
like it's just this is something that sticks out into my mind as just like the most bizarre thing I ever saw on television, and it was just not treated well. But like the different groups of friends, they're having like the group of friends has split into 2 rival groups that are fighting for some reason, and they pull this prank. This is important. This is the end of the year. It's been a hard year. I get to have this moment where so there's like this escalation of pranks happening between both sides until one side like glues the other side to their chairs in a classroom, and they're like, "Oh, very funny, ha ha ha," and then they pour honey on them. Like their buckets hanging that they didn't see, and then they pour honey on them. And I was like, oh, okay, we're stuck here and covered in honey. Big deal. And then a bear comes into the room.
What?
And so like the idea is that they somehow got a bear, covered their friends in honey.
Was this a late?
This was a later one.
Okay.
So to be clear, this is attempted murder.
It should be, but then it just like hard cuts to like Mr. Feeney being like, a bear? And then it's just like treated as like just nothing. They got a bear.
Like, was it Winnie the Pooh or like
No,
Paddington?
it was a real
or
bear.
a
It was a
okay.
real bear. It's like they actually got a real bear
I mean,
for
this
the show.
feels like a real like grab for ratings here for TGIF.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then the weirdest thing about that episode is then like there's the prank that goes too far, and then it suddenly becomes a very serious episode after they covered their friends in honey
So
and released a bear.
The bear episode was not the prank that went too far.
No, it wasn't. Amazingly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I
what-
feel like I need to watch this episode now.
I need to know what the prank that went too far is.
They somehow like released a photo of like one of the ladies in like the sexy lingerie that she like sent to her boyfriend or something.
Oh wow, that
And-
seems like prescient.
What? How do you mean?
Oh, because like that this is like the 90s, right? So or maybe early 2000s.
Things
So
weren't
this
digital.
is before like you had all this problem with people sending like pics to each other on their phones. and
Oh
everything,
yeah. But so that was like, oh, okay, now this is a very serious episode. It's like we gotta learn a lesson. It's like it was a bear, and Mr. Feeney just saying a bear. That stuck out in my mind. I've been dying to get that off the chest. This whole podcast was created just so someday I could talk about that Boy Meets World episode.
Now I'm thinking about the fact that Mr. Feeney played John Adams in
Yeah, that's
1776, the
right.
musical.
It all ties
It
back.
goes back to the tarring and
It all ties back. Yeah, I always wondered that in school, like, because I never got a good explanation. Like, well, so like, is this just covering them in like something sticky, and then they like
yeah,
are
I
kind
guess
of
it does
embarrassed?
sound
and-
like that. If it's like, oh, okay, yeah, they just have to scrub the tar off. But yeah, no, it
No,
was,
you basically almost always die. Yeah.
Wow, this country has
Right.
such a rich culture and tradition.
But the feathers are a weird part because it's totally superfluous.
Well, it's I think the aspect of like humiliation,
Right.
Not just. I mean, you can just kill somebody, but make them look like a giant chicken.
Right.
And laugh at them as they're burning to death. Oh my God, that's what American history is?
Wow.
Wow.
America.
Make America great again. Huh.